Hi there, thank you for joining us today, and thanks to Deacon Ryan and Steve Sustacek for joining us as well. Looking forward to the conversation today. Deacon Ryan is in Theology 4 at the seminary, anticipating ordination here a little later this spring. And Steve, in addition to being the son of a soon-to-be Catholic priest, is in the St. Paul Seminary Institute for Diaconate Formation program as well. So these two, God willing, will both be ordained ministers sooner rather than later, and happy to sit down and talk to them today. So thank you guys for joining us and sharing your story.
Yeah,
with the
thanks for having us.
YouTube audience today, among other folks who are out there. So, for starters, how are we feeling? We'll start with you, Deacon Ryan. We're recording on April 2nd. Ordination is May 25th. So we're like a matter of weeks away now. How does that feel? How's that sinking in?
Exciting.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a weak word to describe what I'm feeling, but I'm very excited. I think in the church's wisdom, she has you be ordained a deacon and then a priest. So I've been through the ordination process.
Yeah.
So some of the butterflies that you get before you make a big thing like that, big ordination, those have subsided, and now there's kind of a peaceful excitement, I think. Also, the classes are getting a lot more practical.
Yeah.
It's less hitting the books, and it's more like, okay, day to day, in a couple months, here's what we're going to be doing. So I think all the guys are really excited.
Yeah, fantastic. How about you, Steve, just as a dad, knowing that your son is this close to becoming a priest?
We're very excited in our family. We've been looking forward to this day for a long time. It's a wedding feast coming up where I know he married the church last year, but it's another feast again this year, and we're very excited. Just had me praying about how the church is a close part of our family now, because my daughter's getting married later this year.
Wow.
And her in-laws will become my family.
Right.
And in the same way, Ryan is marrying the church, so the church will be a part of our family in a whole new way. It already is, but it will be even more so coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk vocation stories a little bit. Deacon Ryan, you start. Just kind of walk us through your calling to the priesthood and what's brought you to today. And then, I don't know if Steve's been a part of that, but now you have your own vocation stories. You discern the diaconate, so we'll get into that next. But you start.
Yeah. Very, very grateful to be born and raised St. Michael. St. Michael. The priest for a long time was actually Father Michael. So
Of course.
there's a lot of Michaels going on there.
It's a unique community up there.
Yeah.
Northwest metro of the Twin Cities here.
And it was a blessing, too, because in the community, there seemed to always be someone going through formation for priesthood. And so there was always, as I look back, someone on that road. So it was kind of a well-trodden path. But went to the Catholic school growing up. We'd pray before bed. Dad would pray with us. Go to Mass every week. So you did have the Catholic upbringing for sure. And it was blessed. Catholic school, so you're learning all the things, but as a little kid, it's kind of hard for that to be real, or at least in my case it was. So it felt more like a storybook character, Jesus and Mary and these people.
Yeah.
Kind of a storybook. But when I got to 6th grade, we went to extreme faith camp. So my folks, Dad, Mom, signed me up for that. And I wasn't super enthused to go, but when I went, it absolutely changed everything. Like that week, it wasn't like the Lord opened up the heavens and said, be a priest. I think I would have been scared if he even mentioned priesthood at that point as a 6th grader. But the experience in adoration, Bishop DeGrood, then Father DeGrood, was behind the monstrance, and he was walking from teen to teen, 6th grader to 6th grader, and giving them each a personal benediction. Wow. And so as I'm kneeling there as a 6th grader, that was the moment it clicked. When the Lord in the Eucharist was inches from my face, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm loved. Oh my goodness, he has a plan for my life. It's just overwhelming. And so from that moment, it wasn't necessarily I want to be a priest. I've always wanted to be a teacher. When I was really little, I wanted to be a bus driver. But because I got the little microphone. But now I get one of these, so God provides.
You sit behind that big wheel and drive a big machine.
Yeah, this sounds great.
Yeah.
But wanted to be a teacher all the way through. So priesthood never really crossed my mind, but at that moment, just kind of experiencing the Lord's love as a sixth grader, I wanted to be close to him. Whatever it was, I knew it was going to be with him. But priesthood didn't really come up until the last year of high school. I kind of had everything planned out that I wanted to do. I was going to go to a certain school. I was going to swim. I was going to hold these positions, and I wanted to be a math teacher. My grandpa was a college math professor, actually. So it kind of ran in the family, and that's what I wanted to do. So as a senior in high school, I went to go visit this college, and I thought I was going to love it, and I hated it.
Huh.
I just absolutely hated everything about it.
Yeah.
And so just going to the chapel that evening, and I'm looking like at the monstrance because they're at adoration. And I'm like, Lord, what the heck? This is everything we wanted,
I had it all planned out.
Yeah, this was supposed to be perfect. And just the sense in my heart was, you should go look at the seminary.
Wow.
I didn't even really know what that was, but I needed to go look at it. It felt a bit like God was like spiritually pocket dialing me. Like I'm definitely receiving a call, but like I'm not sure if this is like intentional or not. I don't know if you can do that being God, but that's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the seminary, even though I still had a lot of doubts, can I actually do this? I'm loud. I don't speak Latin. We could go on and on about the things where I didn't feel like, are you sure this is for me? But I'm like, Lord, these guys in the seminary have that same fire that I experienced as a sixth grader. And so I'm not sure if you want me to be a priest, but I'm willing to give this a try. And so when I went, the peace continued to grow very gradually. And now we're a couple weeks from priesthood ordination. So
Yeah.
it feels a little bit less like a pocket dial now. It feels a little bit more.
That's good.
Yeah.
I've had a few intentional conversations between the first pocket dial and,
Yeah, that's
and now
right.
with the Lord. So that's awesome. So Steve, give us a little background on you. Just where you come from, what you do for work, and we can kind of start there.
Sure. I have 3 kids in my family. My wife is Jennifer. I work at a company called Fair Isaac. They work a lot with databases, and they're known for credit scores, FICO scores.
Sure.
So I've been there for 27, 28 years. But I've been, over the past 20-some years with kids, I've been so focused on being a father. And I think that being in that role has really helped me to grow in love. And up until recently, I had no idea the Lord was calling me here. I was just so excited that my children were following God's calls for their lives. But God revealed to me that He has something for me. And it's been beautiful. Like I said, it's kind of been a gradual call,
Yeah.
but it feels right. It feels like I belong here, and he keeps opening these doors for me, and I keep stepping into the doors.
Yeah. What specifically was that process like? When did you maybe first know God might be calling you to the permanent diaconate, or how has that process gone?
A friend told me to sign up for the Catechetical Institute.
Sure.
Because to know Scripture better is to know God better, to know the Lord better. So it was on my heart to do that for some time. I went, and lo and behold, one of my teachers was Deacon Joe Mahalik. And at his first class, he was telling us, and you all know that this is a prerequisite for the diaconate. And I'm like,
Of course,
I didn't
he
know.
just slipped that in there. So
I
for the
did-
uninitiated, the Catechetical Institute is another offering of the St. Paul Seminary for lay people diving into Scripture and catechism. It is a prerequisite to become a permanent deacon.
Yes.
Deacon Joe Mahalik, who you mentioned, was the director of the seminary's Institute for Diaconate Formation for many, many years. He now has a leadership position with the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, but a staunch local advocate of the diaconate here. So that all makes sense that's where the seeds were maybe planted at first.
Yes, and I remember coming home that night, I told my wife, Jennifer, what do you think about me being the deacon? Check, you're discerning that. And her response was, no way. She's like, it kind of caught her off guard. She's like, I'm not a deacon wife. That's not who I am. So deep in my heart, I kind of didn't let go of it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to continue to pray about this. The following fall, I went to there's a Deacon Discernment Day coming up, So I asked her if she wanted to go. She had to work. So she said, if you want to, so she changed from heck no. And in the fall, I asked her, and she said, if you want to go, knock yourself out. So then I went, and at the Deacon Discernment Day, I learned that the wife goes to everything the first year. So I had to go home and tell her that. She just told me to knock myself out. And now, so yeah, that was my response. Well, how am I going to tell her this?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was, as soon as I told her that, she then said, well, if you're serious about this, we better apply. And there's a lot of application things to go through. She had hers filled out before I had mine filled out. And she's like, what's the holdup? Why are you taking so... I mean, I was working through it quick as well. So I saw something change in her. And we were empty nesters last year for our first year of going to everything. And I've noticed it's brought us closer together, and it brought us closer to Christ. So it's really been a beautiful thing for me and my family.
Yeah. You mentioned family. What was life at the Sustacek household like growing up? I know you're one of three, you said, but there's obviously some good things happening faith-wise where we've got multiple vocations coming out, and just what you can describe your childhood in front of your dad, put you on the spot, and then my question to you, as a young father myself, will then be like, "What'd you do?" You know, like how to give me some advice. But yeah, I mean, what was it like from your perspective?
I mentioned it was blessed, for sure, blessed. But when I say that, I think anybody would say, life's never easy, but there's blessings. Yeah. But the Lord is very patient, very gradual, and as you look in hindsight, it's always a lot clearer than in the moment. One thing that's really blessed us, I think, the parish is very strong where we're at. We talked about the youth group, but in the family itself, Mom was actually doing what Dad was doing. They were both in data analytics or something like that. I don't know, I was little. But she actually went back to school when we were young to become a hospice nurse. I don't think she initially thought hospice. I think it was just kind of nursing broad. But when we were little, she went back to school. So that we spent a lot of time with Dad on the weekends, and then during the week she'd be home with us. So we always kind of had this parental presence at home, which was really good. I feel like I know both of my parents really deeply, which is a gift. But I think in her specific line of work, that's been a very gradual place of conversion for the whole family. Because I've heard her mention before, in her line of work as a hospice nurse, working with people at the end of life, either you're a Christian or you're depressed. Because, if you're surrounded by death, and death is the end, that's just, the saddest thing you could possibly... Why would you want to surround yourself with that? Well, with her, it's like I'm walking with the family. I'm walking with this person who, as Christians, this is their heavenly birthday. They're being born into eternal life. They're going to meet the Lord. And so I think as she's kind of grown deeper in her work, as I've stepped into my vocation, and that was also kind of a learning curve, I think. It was unexpected to me. I felt like I was pocket dialed. I think both of them had kind of their own areas of question around wait, why are you doing this? What is this? We're supportive, but a lot of questions to be answered. But I think the Lord in his own way kind of used each of the other family members to bring us deeper into love of him.
Yeah. What was that process like from your perspective, Steve? It's, I think you've maybe shared with me offline before that, it was a little surprising when your son comes and says, hey, I'm thinking about being a priest.
Yeah, that was a very joy-filled announcement. And like I said, I was probably happiest that he was open to wherever God's calling him, because that, as a parent, you can't beat that, because that's where you'll find true peace and joy, is you're following God's will for your life. But yeah, I echo some of the same things Ryan mentioned about our community, our parish. We were active in a Catholic school, and I think that really helped us grow as a family. I didn't grow up in a Catholic school, so it was so nice being surrounded with other families, with kids the same age, with parents who love the Lord, and we really leaned on them, and they helped us grow. and then being a part of a men's group, but just the community up there. And, then Ryan got me involved in the youth group, and now I'm still involved in the youth group, so it's really beautiful. And one thing I encourage parents, too, is when your kids are that age of going to youth group, the best thing you could ever do is to go there with your kids. You're not going to be there doing things with them, but if you're there actively participating and being part of it, that makes a world of difference to those kids. You're not just dropping them off. You're growing in your faith too, so they don't feel like they're kind of on their own. You're kind of with them in this.
Yeah.
So I think there's been some stickiness, going through the youth group, and I think the Lord's been using me in there with them and other kids. I've been hopefully trying to work and share in that capacity.
Absolutely. Other than kind of showing up at places like youth group and communicating that level of investment, what were some of the things you and Jennifer did as parents when these guys were growing up to really instill the faith? I know there's no magic formula for these things, but what were some of the things that worked for you guys?
There was a time where a switch went off, where I realized, I think Ryan was in second grade, and he came home and he started asking me about his homework. Well, his homework was about the sacraments. It was about the Eucharist. It was about confession. And a lot of these things I haven't heard of or remembered or even thought of since I was back in second grade. And so I remember he had a lot of questions for me, and I was secretly reading ahead so I could be able to tell him the right answer. So the light bulb went on. I'm like, I love my son so much that I want this truth for him. How come I'm not jumping in with both feet? So I made a decision right then and there that everything I was going to do was going to be for the Lord. And so my whole life kind of flipped around. I mean, everything I was doing had to have a purpose of bringing us closer to the Lord. I mean, a lot of Saturdays, nights, we go to Christian music night down in St. Louis Park. I can't tell you how many times we've been there, but it's a 40-minute drive each way. But we'd go there, and they'd crank up Christian music, and we'd go rollerblading, roller skating. They'd bring friends. We had fun. We started going to family rosaries every weekend. We signed up for a family camp up at Camp Lebanon, where our parish went up there. Yeah, I got real active in the school, in the church, but it felt like everything we were doing, I was kind of trying to be intentional about everything we're doing is going to lead us closer to Christ. So it was weird how I went from just kind of, stumbling through life to suddenly my eyes were open and everything had a purpose. So, yeah, that's kind of the stuff we did. Like I said, I know we've been to the roller garden it feels like a few hundred times, but we did like things like that all the time. Yeah. It's kind of that was our normal mode of operation.
And then it was so beautiful that, like, being on the receiving end, it wasn't something that was, like, imposed on me per se. But, like, I remember for his weekly adoration hour, like, he'd always be like, hey, do you want to join me? It's like 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. or whatever awful time of the... Maybe people like that, but he'd invite it. Sometimes I'd say yes, sometimes I'd say no. But even the constant invitation, like, you can tell that, like, he actually means what he's saying.
Yeah.
And we'd go to confession regularly as a family. And I remember, like, when Mom actually came back to confession, her catechesis, I think, was a little less growing up, so there was just less knowledge of the faith. But when I was early in high school, Mom came back to confession. She came with us when we went as a family, and Dad took us out to a super nice dinner afterwards. Just totally, like, reverencing what just happened.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this is a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like, the Vikings could win the Super Bowl, or Mom goes back to... This is, like, a very big deal. And so I just received it as, like, this is something authentic. Like, he actually believes what he's saying. She believes what she's saying. This is something that's taking root in their life. And that kind of opens the door as well for the kids.
That's so beautiful. There's so many young people today, questioning and sometimes leaving the faith. I mean, did you ever have, like, this rebellious stage that you had to, like, get through? I mean, what was that like? And was it just kind of smooth sailing all the time, or were there
No.
things you wrestled with too?
No, it was certainly not smooth sailing. Because like as a little kid, right, we talked about it feels like a storybook character. You encountered the Lord, and then throughout middle school, even being at the public school, then it was like it did have this reality to it. But as high school rolled around, I don't know. It was also a very kind of a gradual drifting away.
Yeah.
And I just recall, like, I never stopped going to Mass. I never stopped believing. I never stopped receiving the sacraments or anything. There was always that kind of built in. But, yeah, there was certainly a trial there of, like, am I going to take this seriously? Am I going to do this wholeheartedly? And I would say, like, going through high school, I never felt pressured, but always encouraged. Which was something really beautiful. Yeah, invited but not forced. It's just a really beautiful thing.
That's a hard balance to strike as a dad, though, isn't it? How did you kind of walk that line, you and your wife?
You know, that word invitation has kind of been forefront in my mind.
Yeah.
Even more so now. It's like in life, you know, you can invite, and you need to invite, but we can't force anybody, you know, and I think it all starts with love, right? We need to lead with love and invite. And if we do that, you know, the Lord can work through us. But we do need to invite, and we do need to love. But, yeah, I have 2 younger daughters. They're both at Mankato State right now. One's engaged later this year, so I have 2 big sacraments happening this year.
Congratulations.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's very exciting. And lots of prayers.
Yeah.
So lots of prayers for them as well.
Of course.
And continually invite. And I think sometimes parents think that, you know, hey, once their kids are 18, they're kind of done, but you still need to connect. You still need to touch base. You still need to ask them how they're doing. You know, it doesn't end. They still need you. So I've been kind of learning that as I go through these stages with Ryan and Rachel and Raylyn.
Yeah.
And my role as a dad doesn't go away. In some ways, it might be growing, you know, because they need your to know you still love them and you're there for them.
Yeah. I think it's becoming really apparent in a lot of Catholic circles too, just the importance of community that you've alluded to. And I mean, we kind of joke, but it is serious. St. Michael's a very thriving Catholic community, kind of on the edge of the Twin Cities. How did it get to be what it is today, and what can those who, you know, are going to be charged with building, you know, their own sense of community in parishes or other places? I mean, I almost feel like St. Michael can be kind of a case study. What have you guys learned, or what would you share with those who are trying to build community themselves?
Yeah. I think you hit on it. I've heard it described as like very fertile soil.
Yeah.
So when you're being planted there, either in the school or in the youth group or whatever it is, it's fertile soil. And so you're going to be watered, you're going to have the sunlight, but you do need to cooperate with that. And that part of that comes at home as well. But one thing I just mentioned on my front, and Dad was actually part of it too, the way that the youth group is structured is something that is unique, where you have this initial encounter as a middle schooler. The whole program is built around reaching the middle schoolers, and now even younger. I think the younger that you can reach people, the better. But once you have this encounter, you experience the Lord, then it starts getting sustained in, as a high schooler, you are now going to be focused on ministering to the middle schoolers. And so it's this idea of, after I've received the Lord, the best thing that I can do is to give. And I think both of me and my dad have talked about, like, I am the most at peace when I'm giving of myself. When I'm not focused on myself. When I'm actually others focused, then I'm free. The Lord is loving through me. He's affirming through me. And even as a high schooler, to taste that, like, there's freedom there. You're actually living the Christian life. And so we would go to these, you know, extreme faith camp where, as a high schooler, I'd be ministering to the middle schoolers. We'd rent out the whole camp for just our parish. You know, there'd be hundreds of kids from St. Michael. It was just this beautiful place of evangelization and encounter with God. yeah, I can't say thanks enough for that.
Yeah.
And one thing you touched on a little bit is one of the beautiful things is those middle schoolers, they really look up to those high schoolers. So when they're modeling, loving the Lord and showing them how they live and how, what's on their heart, it means the world to those middle schoolers. So not only are they, experiencing Christ in the monstrance and at Mass, but they're experiencing Christ in a real way from those high schoolers. And from coming from a person that means the world to them. I mean, when you're middle school, sometimes, you're maybe not listening to your parents as much as you used to, but when you see a high schooler, you listen. They've got things figured out. So if you have a high schooler speaking to a middle schooler about the Lord, it's just a beautiful, for both sides. Like Ryan mentioned the high schooler side, but I oftentimes see it through the middle schooler side. It's very powerful for them. And then a couple years later, they're now the high schooler, and now they're, sharing it with. It's just beautiful to see kids come through and do both sides.
Yeah, the roots go deeper when you give,
Absolutely. You both have mentioned in several of your responses just this importance of the Eucharist, getting in front of the monstrance, holy hours, adoration. Can you both talk just about what role Eucharistic devotion has played in this journey you and your family's been on together? You can go first, Steve.
For me, as I look back, I know it's having a weekly adoration hour. It's just so core. So I look back on my life for the last 20 years. I've been going to see the Lord every week. It just, you may not realize it from day to day to hour, but it's just so beautiful having that time spent with the Lord. And in formation now, I'm learning even how much more powerful it is than I even realized. What did I hear people? It's like brain surgery is being done on you when you're there. So when we're there, it's not what we're actively doing. It's not like, oh, Steve's reading this flyer and Steve's doing these exercises. No, it's what is the Lord doing within me. So I'm almost like a patient, and He's working on me. So by me being there and me being open and just being alert and attentive to Him, He does all the work. So I'm learning so much more, and the beautiful thing is the more I learn, the more it just makes me so filled with joy that, we have perpetual adoration in our parish. I go there all the time, but it's nice having that scheduled time, because then I am gonna be there every single week. And I think those late hours, like Ryan mentioned, those are extra special, because there is some sacrifice with it too. But there's so many graces that come with it. Sunday at 2 a.m. I don't go out, and I'm not getting in trouble at all. I have to go to bed a little early, and I get up and I spend time with the Lord. Well, then I might need to sleep in a little bit. Well, what's Sunday all about? It's a day of rest. So I sleep in. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
How about you, Deacon?
Yeah, I obviously second everything. I learned it from him, so I second what he's saying. I think seeing it lived out and how it impacts another person is really powerful. Like, it makes you desire what they are experiencing. So like when Dad would talk about, going to adoration and being with the Lord, and when he would come back and there was actually like this deeper peace within him, like it wasn't something I could necessarily put my finger on, like, oh, this is different here. But it was like just the way you're approaching life. It's like, oh yeah, a lot of this isn't even in my control anyways, It's like the Lord He's got this all in His hand. And so seeing that lived out and eventually coming to terms with like, oh, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from this place of dependence on God, and he's seeing the Lord's performing brain surgery, quote unquote, for him when he goes to this adoration hour. So that's just really pivotal, I think, for each one of us in the family, is this Eucharistic devotion. How cool is it that like this is the Eucharistic revival, the year of the Eucharistic revival, and this is ordination year, That's a very cool coincidence there. So,
yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to get the timing right in my head. Would you Steve have started diaconate formation before or after Ryan was ordained a transitional deacon about a year ago this time?
Actually, it was probably the year before.
Okay. So you're sitting there at the basilica. Your son's being ordained a deacon. You're discerning the diaconate. I mean, what was that moment like?
You know, it's a script that only the Lord could write. Because part of diaconate formation, it's required that we go to the transitional ordination. Well, the weeks leading up to that ordination, they were going through with us all of the things that happen at the diaconate ordination and how beautiful it is. Well, here's me, knowing my son is going to be actually being ordained. It was like, you can't make this up. I'm getting specific instruction on what he's going to be going through and all the deep meaning. It just had such a deep personal meaning, and my wife is there too. We're both hearing this firsthand. It was so beautiful. It was just, the timing was just divine and perfect. But anyway, it was just so ironic how it was right before then, and it brought it to a whole new level of meaning and understanding. Meaning that I didn't fully understand before, so that was good timing.
Deacon, what does it mean to you that, Lord willing, you and your dad might both be ordained ministers of the church at some point?
Surreal. I mean, how special that, like, there's obviously the natural bond of, like, this is my dad.
Yeah.
Like, I look like him, I talk like him, I drive like him, all these different things. Sometimes they think he's my older brother, which is really fun. But so there's this natural bond. But as we've grown in our faith, and like he said, like when I'm going through this in second grade, he's almost like re-going through it with me.
Yeah.
And he's coming to youth group with me. And as I'm going through formation, he's there for me. There's been a number of like prodigal son-like moments, where I'm really like, Lord, is this what you want from me? Is this what you... And I go to my dad, and there's this wonderful image of God the Father. And so to see the relationship between me and my dad kind of deepen in the supernatural, and now to, like, I don't want to say finish because I feel like it's just the beginning.
Right.
But to finish, quote unquote, in ordination. Like, I'm going to be a priest. My dad, God willing, is going to be a deacon. That's incredible. That's incredible. We pray the breviary together already. But to think someday during Mass, he'd be holding the chalice and I'd be holding the paten. It's just a very beautiful thought. My dad. That's a beautiful thing. So.
Love it. That's awesome. Other than that, what are you most looking forward to about being a priest?
Pope Francis, a couple years ago, said, it must have been in just a homily or a Wednesday audience. I don't know exactly where it's from, but he said, the parish is an oasis of love, an oasis of mercy. And the more I turn on the TV or read the news or whatever, I don't think it's any secret to anyone that, like, it's like a desert out there. I mean, people are dying for love, literally, and they just don't even know where to look. And so to be a priest, to be someone who is in a parish, who's entrusted with this oasis, who has the responsibility before God to build up this oasis, to make it bigger, to have it be a place where people can go and receive love, to be filled of overflowing with God's love, to share that with the world. That's amazing. What an honor, what a privilege. And the sacraments is a practical way God does that. Being with people in the ups and the downs of their lives, I can't wait. Seminary has been awesome.
Yeah.
But I can't wait. I think, like, right now in this place, kind of the attitude of my heart is like a hopeful gratitude. Like, I am so grateful for where God has brought me, and I'm very excited about what's coming. I couldn't be going forward into what God has planned without the growth and the gifts and the blessings and the richness of seminary. So there's gratitude for what has come, like, behind me, has gotten me to this point, and there's a lot of hope for what God's going to do through me, with me, but also to me. Because anytime you minister to someone, God's also ministering to you, It's not as if like, I'm on this perch and it's like I'm learning from you too. We're both kind of here in awe of what the Lord is doing in you. So very excited.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Steve, you're a little relatively earlier in the journey when you look at diaconate formation, but when you kind of envision yourself in the future and continue to discern, what attracts you to the diaconal call that you're discerning right now?
Probably service is a big thing for me. Ryan kind of touched on this a little earlier, but I love serving others. Getting outside of myself, that's where I really feel the Lord's love. The world would look at you and say, oh, wow, that's so wonderful you're doing that for those people. But kind of how God math works is when you give of yourself, He's actually, you don't do it to receive back, but He's loving you in such a beautiful way that the world doesn't realize that, like Ryan said, I'm actually receiving so much by doing this. Mm-hmm. But for the last 5-10 years, I love being a sacristan and reading and being at daily mass. Just being close to the Lord is important to me. So to actually, and I know that as I learn about the Lord's truth, it's all true. Whether I understand all of it yet or not, I'm learning more and more. But I accept it all. But it's just beautiful to be a part of the church and to be a part of God's church and to be close to the Lord. And so that's kind of what the desire of my heart is. It's serving those in His church and being part of the church and serving.
If I could just comment on that. A couple years ago, I remember you were kind of discerning, what does the Lord want me to do next? My kids are getting older and, they're gonna go to college, be empty nester. And so you were kind of kicking a couple things around. And I remember just asking you, like, when do you feel the most alive, or when do you feel the most blessed? And the two things you mentioned were when I'm giving to other people, and you mentioned being a sacristan. And I'm thinking in my head, 2 + 2 = 4. I'm like, wow, deacon means servant, and you love being in the sanctuary. You love being a sacristan because you get to be close to God. So in my head, I'm doing the math. I'm like,
I can see that.
It adds up. But that's something that I'm like, all right, Lord, you have to reveal that to him. I can't just come out and say, the answer's 4, He actually has to reach out to you and share that with you. But when you brought that forward a couple of years later, it was just this beautiful thing. It was like,
yeah,
I've kind of seen it, but the Lord Himself revealed that to you, and you were able to receive it. So,
well, that's part of the discernment process too, right? Whether it's for priesthood or diaconate, is talking to those whom you trust and who are closest to you. Because, like, I know we all get in our own head pretty easily, but to have your dad's outside perspective or your son's outside perspective, I'm sure that's been huge as you've gone through this.
Especially
too.
Someone who cares deeply for you and wants the best for
Yeah.
you. Like you said, like a parent or a spouse or your child. And I mentioned my wife in my story. Her response and her reaction and her change. Sometimes at the time I wasn't necessarily knowing where the Lord was leading me, but just He was making it very obvious that it was coming through her.
Yeah.
And then hearing it through Ryan. So it was kind of very powerful to me. It's like, I think this is what, this is too much a coincidence.
Yeah.
This is where the Lord wants me to go. So, and it's been very
Those good wives and moms, man, it's like, you know me better than I know myself sometimes.
Yeah.
Praise God. Okay, what did the Sustaceks like to do for fun? Other than...
I always tell the guys at the seminary, if they're going to come over, I'm like, one thing you need to know, you think I talk a lot. I'm like, I am the most introverted of the group. Like, everyone feels like they're talking at once. And so I remember, like, when Rachel's fiance came over for the first time, everyone's talking. It's just so loud. And so I'm like, okay, and there's only 5 of us. Like, it shouldn't be that loud. But I told them across the table, I'm like, just pick a wavelength and stay on it, because we're all over the place. But we love being around each other. There's a lot of life, a lot of joy, a lot of laughter. And I also appreciate, too, like you mentioned earlier, it's not always smooth sailing. It's not. And in that talking, there is kind of a freedom to actually express, hey, this has been hard, or like, this has been going on. And there is something stabilizing about that, having a family that can receive you there and even speak into it, you know. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that to me. It's not the same thing, but I've gone through something similar or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
Sure.
We're also avid Vikings fans. Love sports.
It's good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll see how things go this next season. Might be take a step back to take 2 steps forward situation.
We'll see. Before ordination is the draft, so we'll see what Quasey does.
Now, I remember us posting pictures from the seminary Super Bowl parties on social media, and you were in, like, Chiefs gear. Isn't there, like, a Chiefs connection, too? It's okay to like more than one team. There's no judgment here.
Yeah, no judgment. I love Andy Reid as a coach.
How can you not?
So it's a particular...
Yeah.
I liked him when he was with the Eagles, so I
Yeah.
cheered for the Eagles. And now that he's with Kansas City, I cheer for him. I actually think on a deeper level, like, of course, being the priest, you see into the deeper. When he lost his son and then still coached that season, I just thought that was heroic.
Yeah.
Like, there was something really beautiful about that. The perseverance. And, like, the team wasn't doing well, but he was still, you know, composed and giving himself. And, I mean, the man's been through a lot, and he's one of the most successful coaches of all time. So in that way, I really look up to Andy.
Yeah.
Love to meet him someday.
Leader of men, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, been a Vikings fan your whole life, Steve?
Yeah, I think we had season tickets for like 20 years.
All right.
Yeah, so the kids have been going to games, and I remember even on our wedding day, it happened to fall on the Vikings bye week. I remember the Father Bill Bear was our priest, and I remember he even mentioned it during his homily at our wedding. And I'm like, and thankfully for Steve, the Vikings had their bye week this week. I'm like, oh my gosh. But everybody knew that was important to me. You
Yeah.
know. Back then, it was much more important to me. I understand now. I enjoy when they win, but you know, I kind of have it maybe a little more in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
I
easy
enjoy it, but at the same time, it's not a religion to me.
Sure.
But it's a pastime and something you can visit with and can relate to people with as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'd always say growing up, he's like, one Mass is more important than all the Super Bowls combined. And for us, you know, that hits deep because we're like, Vikings still haven't won one. You know, there's nothing I desire more than seeing the Vikings.
That thought got me going to daily Mass because I knew how important the Super Bowl was to me growing up. I grew up in the 70s where I saw 4 losses. And we haven't been back since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now I realize that as much as importance as I put on that, one Mass being said is infinitely more important than all of those put together.
Yeah.
Because you notice everybody that wins one, it's not fulfilling what's, you know, they're happy, but all they can do is like, now we're going to work on another. There's nothing there to sustain, you know.
Right.
And as a fan, I'd probably be the same way. It's like, I've been waiting for this for so long, but it's just empty. The hole is still there in your heart.
Right.
You know, but if you have the Lord and you're serving others and God's working through you, that hole is filled with the Lord. And you have that peace and joy. So it's just beautiful to have that perspective. Not that I don't, you know, would I enjoy if we won? Of course I'd enjoy if we won a Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be a lot of fun.
It's coming.
You think so?
I hope so.
We can all hope. We can all hope. Well, this has been awesome, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time, and God bless and prayers as your ordination comes up, prayers and continued discernment for you as you go through
Thanks, Phil.
diaconate formation, and thank you for sharing some wisdom and knowledge and your story with us today. And thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube or our other digital channels, and visit stpaulseminary.org for more as well. Thanks, and God bless.